The stars over Arcturus shimmered like polished obsidian. Each a distant, I watched in the colony's quiet splendor unfold beneath them. Vast silver domes stretched across the valley floor, their crystalline shells pulsing gently with life from within. Children played near geothermal vents, while elders harvested skyfruit in orchards grown under filtered ultraviolet light. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a thriving world carved for what had once been frozen rock. Peace, it seemed, had finally found a home among the stars. Commander Alina Voss watched the scene from orbit aboard the Eidolon, her flagship. Even from high above, Arctura looked like a jewel suspended in space. Her fingers hovered over a holographic projection, tracing the colony's energy lines as if to memorize them. Final sweep complete, Commander, came the calm voice of her tactical officer, Lieutenant Karn. No signs of external activity. All quiet. Alina nodded. Maintain wide-angle scans. Peace makes people lazy. I don't like lazy. She stepped away from the console and allowed herself a brief glance at the news feed filtering in from Earth. Another ceremony honoring the League of Cooperative Systems. 50 years of galactic peace, diplomatic unions, and shared prosperity. She had been there at its formation, younger, more hopeful. She had believed then that peace was something you could forge and forget. Down on the surface, Dr. Rikusen adjusted the viewport in his laboratory to block the glare from the rising twin suns. His fingers danced over vials of alien flora samples, but his mind wandered. The field expedition had gone well. The Zelif pod showed promising biochemical signatures, possibly usable in interspecies medicine. The kind of breakthrough that saved lives, not ended them. The comm tablet buzzed gently on his desk. A message from Alina, still running from real responsibility? Dinner when I get down? Riku smirked and tapped back. Only if you're buying. And if you're wearing something less terrifying than that uniform. He paused, staring at the blinking cursor. How long had it been? 5 years? Maybe 6, since they last stood on the same ground. They had taken different paths. Hers steeped in order and firepower, his built on empathy and understanding. But the bond was still there, unspoken and stubborn. He never got the chance to send the message. Without warning, the sky cracked open. It began with a ripple in orbit, a shiver in the void, like the universe holding its breath. Then they came, sleek black ships with jagged hulls and no identifying signals. They slid from the dark, silent, cold. Dozens, hundreds. No warning, no declaration. The first strike wasn't a laser, but a silence. Every orbital satellite blinked out. Communications died mid-sentence. Systems collapsed. On the surface, alarms screamed. The people of Arctura, so used to peace, barely recognized the sound. Then came the fire. Orbital bombardment fell like a rain of suns. Dome shattered. The central hub vaporized in a flash of white, so bright it erased shadows. Firestorms licked the sky. Whole districts were turned to glass. There were no military installations, no defenses, just people, scientists, farmers, children. Riku ran toward the emergency shelter with 3 colonists clinging to his arms. The sky was blood and metal. A streaking vessel overhead opened its belly and spat liquid flame into the biosphere's heart. Screams echoed to the comms, garbled, desperate. He dove into the shelter just as the ground lifted beneath him and hurled them all into darkness. Far above, the Eidolon was already moving. "There's Zerati," Karn growled, fingers dancing across controls. Identification confirmed. Stealth-class vessels. This is a surgical strike. Alina didn't speak, her eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding below. Her ship had just enough time to lift from orbit before the enemy locked them out with jamming fields. Arctura was being slaughtered, and she was watching it happen. "Open a secure channel," she ordered. Earth Command only. The face of Chancellor Everin flickered into view. "Alina, we're receiving fragments." "Arctura's under siege," she said flatly. No provocation. No warning. Civilian extermination. Zerati vessels. This is an act of war. Everin hesitated. "We need confirmation." "I am your confirmation," she barked. "Authorize retaliation or get out of my way." The screen cut to black. Protocol, debate, committees. They had been lulled into a dream. She'd warned them. She turned to Karn. Get me everything we have on the Zerati's last known strongholds. We'll hunt them from the shadows, if we have to. Karn hesitated. Commander, what about survivors? Alina's jaw tightened. We find them, all of them, and then we make the stars remember who they woke. Hours later, the smoke over Arctura still curled toward the heavens. Inside a half-buried shelter, Riku crawled through rubble toward the only working comm unit he could find. Blood trickled down his temple. A young girl sobbed beside him, clutching a broken toy. His voice cracked as he hailed the emergency frequency. This is Dr. Riku's-san. We have wounded civilians. I don't know how many. Static. Then, Dr. Sun, this is Medical Cruiser Myra's Light. We've received your ping. Hold position. Rescue inbound. He slumped back, tears stinging his eyes. The girl clutched his arm tighter. Above them, the sky burned. Back on Earth, Chancellor Everin stood before the Council of Worlds, voice steady but trembling beneath the weight of fury. Footage played on the great dome screen. Arctura's fall, caught by satellite backups that had barely survived the first wave. This is not a border skirmish, she said. This is not a dispute. The Zerati have crossed the line of civilization. They targeted the helpless. They left us no room for doubt. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Old allies looked to one another. Treaties once framed in hope now felt like paper armor. The Solar Wrath Initiative will be activated, Everin declared. With unanimous agreement from the Council, Earth will respond, not with fear, with fury. She paused, then added, Commander Alina Voss will lead our response. In the orbiting dockyards, warships that hadn't moved in decades came to life. Hangars rumbled. Engineers whispered prayers. Missiles slid into launch bays like sharks into water, on the bridge of the Eidolon. Alina watched as new orders were transmitted. Strike force approved. Mobilization immediate. She looked at the stars, no longer silent, no longer distant. They had believed Earth was sleeping. Now they would learn what its awakening looked like. Would you like me to begin Section 2 next? The forge array above Mars burned red with purpose. From its vast rings and orbital scaffolds, ships were birthed in silence. Hulking, gleaming beasts clad in obsidian armor and laced with ion veins that pulsed like arteries. They slid from dry docks into the void, igniting their cores with fire stolen from miniature suns. The Solar Wrath Initiative was no longer a blueprint or contingency. It was real. It was coming. Alina Voss stood at the apex of Control Spire 9, her image magnified across dozens of hollow feeds streaming to Earth and its allies. Engineers, captains, drone tacticians, each listened as her voice cut through the vacuum of uncertainty. This isn't revenge, she said. It's rectification. We are not returning fire. We are ending a threat. They hunted the unarmed. They used silence as a weapon. We will answer in language they understand. When the transmission ended, she removed her command pin and stared at a moment, war-notched, edges dulled by decades of duty. Then she placed it back on her uniform, where it belonged. Duty knocked out, below the command deck. Entire fleets synchronized their final preparations. Ships were given names not from legends, but from Arctura's dead. The Dalen's Hope, Issa Star, Firelight, each vessel a promise, each crew a knife aimed at the throat of the Zerati. Rikusen watched it all unfold from the edge of the hospital ship Solace Meridian. He had survived Arctura, barely, but survival had come with no peace. Even now, surrounded by antiseptic lights and med drones humming through corridors, he felt the silence of that first explosion echoing inside him. He hadn't spoken to Alina since the evacuation. Not directly. There had been a dozen messages drafted, none sent. His days were filled with triage reports, scanned remains, and the weeping of people who had lost entire bloodlines in an instant. His hands, once used to nurture, were now trained in stitching flesh back together in war zones. He had never believed in vengeance. Now, he couldn't decide if he believed in anything at all. When Alina finally did call, it was not for comfort. We launch in 3 days, she said without preamble. I've requested you join the core fleet. Rika blinked, taken aback. Why? I'm not a soldier. I'm a civilian trauma lead. I shouldn't even. You were on Arctura, she said quietly. You saw what they did. The fleet needs more than guns. It needs clarity. Someone to remind us what happens if we lose who we are in the fire. He hesitated, eyes narrowing. So I'm your conscience now? If you like, just make sure you're close enough for me to hear it. There was no warmth in her voice, but no venom either. It was an olive branch forged in pragmatism, and she knew him well enough to offer it without apology. He boarded the medical frigate Lyra's 8 the next morning. Fleet Command formalized the first wave. Strike Group Helios. 6 dreadnoughts, 20 heavy cruisers, dozens of rapid deployment corvettes, and 3 medical carriers. Alina's flagship, Eidolon, would spearhead the assault. The fleet's target, a Zerati fortress moon orbiting the binary stars of Calvrex. Intelligence suggested it was a hub for their forward fleets, and possibly the command node coordinating the Arctura strike. Tactical meetings were held in vast chambers beneath the fleet's core AI hub. Projections danced in midair. Enemy vessel schematics, energy grid weak points, predictive strike patterns. Alina stood at the center, flanked by representatives from the allied Livithai Enclave and synthetic-born Daedalians, former adversaries now bound by mutual threat. This isn't a siege, Alina reminded them. It's an incision, in and out. We cripple their operations and leave them bleeding in the dark. General Silva of the Daedalians regarded her with cold, mechanical eyes. And what are their non-combatants? We're targeting infrastructure, not species, she replied. We don't burn cities. We dismantle capabilities. But in the corner of the room, Rika's silence grew heavier with each detail. The diagrams were precise, the language clinical. Yet he couldn't help but see Arctura reverse. This time, it was they who had the fire, and the Zerati who would burn. After the briefing, he found Alina alone near the grav deck, staring into a hollow view of deep space. She didn't look at him as he approached. You think this will make anything better? He asked. No, she said simply, but it will stop them from doing worse. Rika's voice was quiet. We always think that until worse becomes us. Alina turned, her face shadowed by the light of distant stars. If you think I want this, then you never knew me. If you think I'll allow another Arctura, then you know exactly who I am. The silence between them stretched. Not a void, but a line needed to cross. Later, as the fleet entered final synchronization, Riku visited the refugee deck. Hundreds of survivors from Arctura were housed in modular habitats. Children sleeping beside glowing memory stones. Parents clutching photos retrieved from rubble. He spoke to them, not as a doctor, but as someone who had knelt beside the same ash. One boy, Talon, stood with a metal shard clutched in his hand. It had once been part of the dome that covered his school. Now it was a talisman. They didn't even say anything, the boy whispered. Just came. Just killed. Rika knelt beside him. We won't let them do it again. The boy looked up, eyes rimmed with firelight. Promise? Rika swallowed. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe that vengeance and justice were siblings, not strangers. But all he could manage was, we'll try. On the third day, the fleet left Mars orbit. Engines flared like miniature suns. Formations locked into silent choreography. The ships did not howl as they moved, but something in the stars seemed to ripple in response. From Earth, the night sky shimmered faintly. To the people watching from colony domes and cloud-spire cities, the exodus was awe-inspiring. To the Zerati, it would be the first sign that Earth remembered how to fight. The stars no longer felt distant. They were paths now, arrows, and Earth had just notched the first one. Ready to continue with Section 3? The Calvrex system loomed like a scar in space. Twin stars, one blue, one a flickering red giant, bathed the system in a violent spectrum of light, painting the asteroid fields and planetary rings in pulses of color that shifted like breath. And there, at the heart of the system, the Zerati fortress moon circled its dead planet, a massive structure of jagged obsidian and churning reactors that glowed with sickly green energy. It was not built for aesthetics. It was built for domination. Strike Group Helios emerged from warpfold like a storm breaking through still water. In the silence of vacuum, there was no thunder, but every captain aboard felt a tremor ripple through the hulls as the fleet settled into formation. Fighters buzzed outward in tight coils, scout drones flared to life, and ion signatures lit up the dark like constellations newly born. On the Eidolon's command bridge, Alina Voss leaned forward in her chair, eyes narrowed as the fortress moon filled the view screen. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Cold. Target acquired. All ships locked to Phase 1 positions. Deploy infiltration probes. Activate EM cloaks. Karn ran a finger across the interface. Enemy defense matrix is active but unaware. No response yet. They'll notice soon, she said. Let's make sure what they notice first is fire. From the hangars of Firelight and Dalen's Hope, cloaked assault pods launched in silence. Each housed elite infiltration units, Daedalian sappers, Livethai phase strikers, and Earthborn operatives like Captain Ezra Lang, a former intelligence ghost who had volunteered without being asked. Lang's pod cut across the void like a shard of shadow. Inside, the air was thin, pressurized just enough to hold breath. His team watched the approach through semi-translucent hull panels. The fortress's surface was a labyrinth of interlocking towers and gnarled conduits. Heat signatures flared and vanished like fireflies. Energy cores, munition silos, biolabs. Detachment ready, Lang said. No second chances. They hit the hull like knives. Magnetic clamps engaged. The drill breachers began to hum. Aboard the Lyra's 8, Riku-san paced the medical deck, his hands flexing unconsciously as updates streamed in. Casualty reports had not yet begun. This was the moment before the scream, the moment surgeons dread. He stared at the projected schematic of the fortress moon and wondered how many lives it would take to crack it open. The door behind him hissed, and he turned to see a figure he hadn't expected. Alina. She had come alone, still clad in battlewear, the carbon mesh of her uniform streaked with graphite scuffs. Her expression was unreadable. You should be on the bridge, Rika said. I needed to see something human. She walked to the viewport where the medical team stood poised beside empty beds and suspended triage pods. They all pretended not to see her. This place wasn't meant for war, Riku added, his voice low. It's meant to put people back together. Then it's in the right place, she replied. Riku looked at her for a long time. You know this isn't going to end here. Even if we destroy their node, even if we win today, there'll be more. Alina met his gaze. Then we'll meet them too. He shook his head, bitter. That's the problem with fury. Alina, it feeds itself. Her answer was quiet. And sometimes it burns clean. The alert tone cut through the air before he could respond. Strike team has breached perimeter. Karn's voice said over the intercom. Engagement initiated. Defense grid is activating. Hostiles incoming. The fortress came alive. Thousands of Zerati drones poured from concealed launch bays. Spindly, insectoid machines with wings of plasma and stingers that fired monomolecular shards. The first wave struck the fleet in a storm of orange and green light. Alina turned, her voice snapping orders into the comms as she strode from the medical deck. Engage intercept wings. Protect the Lyra's line at all costs. As she disappeared in the corridor, Riku felt a sudden pulse of fear. Not for himself, but for her. For all of them. Lang's team advanced through the underbelly of the fortress, taking corridors built for a species with 6 limbs and no need for atmosphere. The gravity was inconsistent, shifting from full to none in waves that made every step a gamble. His Daedalian sapper, Unit Threx, deployed nanocharges to bypass sealed hatches. Livethai operatives moved in blurs, blinking through time fractures to gain ground. They reached the central core after 40 minutes of brutal, close-quarters combat. The defenders were fanatics, Zerati soldier caste bred for unflinching obedience. They attacked in swarms, claws flashing, acid rifles scorching the air. Lang planted the central demolition device on a pillar of pulsing energy conduits. Charges set. Core destabilization in 30 seconds. One of the Livethai collapsed nearby, chest bisected by a Zerati cleaver. Threx didn't flinch, just activated the blast countdown and nodded. "This place dies with or without us," Lang said. "We were dead the moment we signed on," Threx replied. Outside, the Eidolon spun through evasive maneuvers, its defense grid absorbing hit after hit. On the upper deck, Karn growled into the tactical array. "Core breach signals confirmed. Fortress destabilizing." Alina's voice rang out, steady despite the vibration of impact against the hull. "All ships initiate retreat vector. Get us clear. Now." The fleet pulled back in precision arcs, fighters recalling, cruisers peeling off in burning spirals. Riku held onto the railing in the medbay as the ship lurched, the starlight outside turning white. And then the moon cracked. It didn't explode, it unraveled. The Zerati fortress folded inward with soundless scream, its energy core imploding in waves of green fire and collapsing metal. The binary stars lit the scene like gods bearing witness. Silence returned. Back on the Eidolon, Alina watched as the debris scattered into the void. Karn exhaled slowly. "We did it." "No," Alina said, her voice grim. "We survived it. That's not the same." Across the fleet, cheers erupted. But Riku stood in the quiet of the recovery ward, where the first shuttles began to bring the wounded. He met each gurney with calm hands, with eyes that had seen too much, with a heart that still broke each time someone called for a loved one who wouldn't come. Later, when he finally found a moment to breathe, he looked up at a message flickering on his comm. From Commander Alina Voss. "Status, secure. Casualty reports in process. Meet me on observation deck 12. We need to talk." He stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed it. Outside, the remnants of war drifted like ash across the stars. "Would you like to proceed with Section 4? The void between stars did not forget. Weeks passed, and the Calvrex moon was now dust. But the echoes of its collapse traveled farther than missiles ever could. Across the Zerati sector, relay hubs blinked out of existence one by one, shattered by saboteurs emboldened by Earth's sudden defiance. Silent colonies once held under claw, and coil began to stir. Resistance, once hidden, now dared to breathe. But the retaliation was not slow in coming. The Eidolon intercepted the first signal near the Jova Drift. A Zerati broadcast, unencrypted, projected on open channels. There were no words, only a pulsating pattern of symbols and guttural static, the sound of a throatless species spelling out rage. It played on repeat, and then, for 1 second, it stopped, replaced by an image, a field of human bodies stretched in a spiral, limbs arranged with inhuman precision. At its center, a child stuffed toy. It wasn't a message. It was a vow. Alina Voss stared at the transmission in silence, jaw clenched. Around her, the bridge crew fumbled for breath. One technician vomited. Karn swore and turned away. Riku stood behind her, still clad in medical grays. He had seen enough death to know performance from reality. This wasn't staged. This had happened somewhere. Recently, the Zerati had made their answer clear. "They're not retreating," he said. "They're escalating." Alina's voice was a low rasp. "We hit their pride. Now they'll hit our heart." Within 48 hours, Earth Command received intel that a new Zerati weapon, an asteroid-turned hive, was on trajectory for Europa Station, the largest civilian colony beyond Mars. Its size was catastrophic. Its escort fleet, massive. Its intent unmistakable. Europa held over 3 million people. The Eidolon and what remained of Strike Group Helios had no chance of beating the weapon in a frontal assault. There would be no time for evacuation. Earth's main fleets were still redeploying from the Calvrex campaign. There were no reinforcements. The only choice was interception. In an emergency war council, projections of the asteroid filled the chamber like a dark god. Its surface crawled with Zerati drones, its inner cavity pulsating with living biomass. It was not just a weapon. It was a birthing nest, designed to release spores and swarms upon impact. Riku watched from the periphery as commanders debated logistics, and Alina stood still, a storm restrained by flesh. "I'll take the Eidolon directly into its path," she said finally. "We make contact before it hits Europa. We breach the hive. We end this before it begins." Karn shook his head. "That's suicide. It's too fast. Too large. You can't cripple that in time. I won't need to, she said. I just need to give it something bigger to eat. The room went still. No, Rika said. You're talking about sacrificing the Eidolon. You'd be killing everyone on board. Alina turned to him. Not everyone. I want you off the ship before we reach strike radius. Medical and civilian personnel evacuate. Only core crew remains. He stepped forward, eyes burning. You don't get to martyr yourself for the sake of a clean narrative. There are other ways. Not this time, she replied. This is a line. Either we stop them here or Europa burns. He opened his mouth, but the room had already shifted. Orders were being issued, crews dispatched, evac routes finalized, and Alina was already moving, not as a woman choosing death, but as a commander choosing necessity. That night on the hangar deck, she found Riku sitting alone beside an evac shuttle, hands on his knees, unmoving. I'm not going, he said before she spoke. I won't let you do this alone. She sat beside him, for once shedding the armor of rank. I need you alive, Riku. Not because I care about the story they'll tell after, but because some part of me still remembers what hope feels like when you speak. He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, I wasn't built for war. No one was. We just adapt to the wreckage. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, he nodded. Then let's wreck something holy to them. The Eidolon approached the asteroid hive at half-light speed. Behind it, the remaining ships of Helios flanked its path, harrying the Zerati escort fleet with precision strikes. Fighters swarmed like hornets. Explosions bloomed in the void. The asteroid loomed ahead, massive and writhing, alive with movement, its surface littered with structures that pulse like infected tissue. Tendrils extended, absorbing solar radiation and feeding the growth within. Alina stood on the forward deck, surrounded by silence save for the hum of reactors beneath her boots. Final charge is set. Karn reported from engineering. Core detonation will breach upon impact. She nodded. All remaining crew status? 32 stayed. Volunteers, most from Arctura. She felt the weight of that truth settle into her bones. They weren't dying for vengeance. They were dying to make sure it ended with them. Alina opened a channel to the fleet. This is Commander Voss of the Eidolon. We're en route to intercept. This is not a call for mourning. This is a promise. Let the stars remember that Earth stood when it mattered. Let the Zerati know that the helpless are not forgotten. We are coming, and we are not afraid. The channel closed. The asteroid began firing. Missiles struck the Eidolon's hull. Decks shattered. Fires broke out. But it did not slow. Like a blade thrown by a furious god, the ship tore through the void, direct, unflinching. Rika stood beside her as the asteroid filled the screen. I should be terrified, he said quietly. Are you? He shook his head. I'm grateful. She smiled. Me too. And then they struck. The collision ruptured space-time. The Eidolon's core detonated in a white-hot sphere of light that swallowed the asteroid hive, its tendrils its screams. Europa's skies flared like a second sun had risen. Then all was still. In the weeks that followed, search drones found fragments of the Eidolon, scattered like sacred relics across the edge of Europa's orbit. No remains were recovered, but the Zerati weapon was gone. Their advance halted. Earth mourned and remembered. A monument was raised on Arctura's soil, now seated, now blooming again. At its center, the names of those lost. At the top, 2 words etched in starlight alloy. They stood. Would you like help formatting the entire story or turning it into a publishable draft?